Before an Olympic athlete wins a gold medal, before a musician performs on stage, and before a student enters an examination hall, something extraordinary often happens. They perform once without moving a single muscle.
Can your brain really prepare for success through imagination? Today, we'll discover one of sports psychology's most fascinating tools, the psychology of mental imagery. Have you ever imagined yourself giving just a completely perfect speech right before stepping onto a stage? Or, maybe you've pictured yourself answering every single question correctly in an exam, or successfully navigating a really tough task before it even happened. Well, this explainer is going to show you that those little moments, they're far more than just daydreams. In fact, back in the 1970s, Soviet Olympic teams actually pioneered the structured use of this very tool. They paired intense physical training with rigorous mental rehearsal, and honestly, the results were so profound that they sent shockwaves through the entire global athletic community. What they discovered was basically a biological loophole. The human brain actually has a really hard time telling the difference between a vividly imagined event and a real one. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how that works, and more importantly, how you can harness it for yourself.
Section 1. The hidden rehearsal.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to just take a second and consider what's actually happening in those super quiet, isolated moments right before a starting gun fires or a curtain rises. To an outside observer, it just looks like someone sitting still with their eyes closed, right? It almost feels like magic. But the truth is, it's deeply, deeply rooted in cognitive science. We call this mental imagery. Simply put, it's the process of creating or recreating experiences in your mind without physically performing them. But here's the kicker. During mental imagery, individuals aren't just having these fleeting, hopeful thoughts. They're not just wishing for the best. They are running a highly controlled, high-fidelity simulation in their minds. They're actively visualizing specific movements, high-pressure situations, emotional responses, and ultimately, totally successful performances, using purely their imagination. It's an absolutely vital psychological skill where the mind literally builds a successful reality before the body even takes a single step.
To really understand how intense this gets, let's look at elite athletes. When a world-class track athlete is sitting in the locker room, they don't just passively think, "Man, I hope I win today." No, they meticulously build the entire environment in their minds layer by layer. They imagine the sharp, distinct smell of the synthetic track. They hear the deafening, chaotic roar of the stadium crowd, and then they mentally dial that noise down to a quiet, focused hum. They feel the exact, rough texture of the starting blocks against their fingers. They visualize the precise, explosive movement of their legs, the rhythmic burning in their lungs, and that surging feeling of just unstoppable confidence. And finally, they visualize the successful completion of the race. This intense, totally immersive mental preparation helps them enter the actual physical competition with vastly greater confidence, laser-focused concentration, and total emotional control. Because to their brain, they have already run the perfect race before they've even tied their shoes.
Section 2. Science of mental imagery.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer biological reality of imagination. Why does a mere thought actually translate into physical readiness? Well, it all comes down to a concept called neural activation. This basically means that your brain activates many of the exact same neural pathways in your motor cortex during a vivid imagination as it does during your actual physical performance. Put into super simple language, the mind effectively tricks the body into thinking the action is real. It's fascinating. Scientists have actually hooked athletes up to EMG machines, which are devices that measure electrical activity in muscles. And they found that when a downhill skier simply sits in a chair and imagines navigating a steep, winding course, the machine detects these microscopic, invisible twitches in the exact leg muscles required to make those turns. Literally no way, right? So when you vividly imagine yourself executing a flawless tennis serve or delivering a really confident presentation, your brain is firing signals as if you are physically doing it. You are literally carving out the neural pathways for success and strengthening the connections between your brain and your muscles, all without lifting a single finger.
And that brings us to a really vital principle in sports psychology, and frankly, in human nature in general. There's a massive, massive difference between imagining mistakes and imagining success. Now, evolutionary speaking, human beings are completely hardwired to imagine worst-case scenarios. Thousands of years ago, imagining the worst, like, say, a predator waiting in the bushes, well, that kept us alive. But in modern performance, this evolutionary bias completely works against us. Because your brain treats vivid images as real physical rehearsal, if you constantly visualize yourself tripping on stage, or failing a big exam, or missing the game-winning shot, you are inadvertently carving neural pathways for failure. You are literally practicing your mistakes. Let that sink in. To utilize this tool properly, you have to consciously override that survival instinct. You absolutely must focus intensely on imagining successful execution. Positive, realistic mental rehearsal builds this robust, unshakable confidence, basically training your brain to expect success rather than fearing failure.
Section 3. Beyond the playing field.
Up until now, we've talked a lot about sports, but this scientifically backed tool is absolutely not limited to the athletic arena. Mental imagery is everywhere. It's operating right behind the scenes of almost every high-level profession. Consider a leading cardiovascular surgeon prepping for a really complex heart bypass the night before the operation. They will sit in a quiet room and mentally walk through every single step of that surgery. And more importantly, they will mentally visualize potential complications, like a sudden drop in blood pressure or an unexpected bleed. And they will visualize themselves calmly and perfectly executing the solution. So by the time the patient is actually in the operating room, the surgeon has already solved the crisis. The exact same applies to public speakers who imagine looking out at a huge audience and delivering a calm, engaging presentation, or students who mentally rehearse entering an examination hall with total confidence, sitting down and smoothly recalling all their study materials. Entering an exam hall or delivering a keynote speech requires the exact same mental toolkit as stepping onto an Olympic track.
Section 4. Building vivid visualizations.
Let's move to and see how this builds into practical application. Because knowing that visualization works is one thing, but how do we actually construct imagery that is powerful enough to activate those neural pathways? Well, effective mental imagery involves so much more than simply seeing a flat, two-dimensional picture in your head. To truly prepare, you have to engage all of your senses. I want you to try a quick exercise with me right now. Don't just picture a lemon in your mind. I want you to imagine the bright yellow color. Now imagine the waxy, slightly pitted texture of its skin. Imagine taking a knife and slicing it in half, hearing that crisp sound and seeing the juice spray up into the air. Now imagine taking a huge bite right into that lemon and feeling the intense, sour, acidic juice hitting the sides of your tongue. If you did that vividly enough, your mouth might have just started watering, right? That is the power of sensory layering. To build effective visualization, you need to vividly incorporate the sights, the sounds, the specific movements, the exact emotions you want to feel, and the physical sensations. The rule here is simple. The more vivid, multisensory, and realistic the imagery is, the more your brain believes it's real, and the more useful it becomes as a true preparation tool.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can take things to the next level. Sports psychologists often recommend a layered approach. You can dramatically strengthen your visualization by combining it with deep relaxation, positive self-talk, and really clear performance goals. But you might be wondering, why does relaxation even matter here? Well, when you're stressed, your brain is in a frantic fight-or-flight mode. By using deep breathing to actively lower your heart rate before you start visualizing, you shift your brain into a state of flow. You start producing alpha waves that make your mind highly receptive to the new neural pathways you're trying to build. You aren't forcing the imagery at that point, you are just letting it absorb. Combine this relaxed state with positive self-talk, reminding yourself of your capabilities and clear specific goals for what you want to achieve, and you create an incredibly powerful psychological state. Together, these techniques act as massive multipliers. They create a mental environment where success feels not just possible, but completely inevitable.
Section 5. The reality of practice.
Now, as fascinating as all of this cognitive science is, we definitely need to manage our expectations a bit. What can visualization actually do? And just as importantly, what can it not do? So the crucial point is this: mental imagery is not a magic spell. It absolutely does not replace physical practice, real-world training, or just plain old hard work. You can't just sit on your couch, visualize yourself playing the piano beautifully, and then expect to sit down at a grand piano and play a masterpiece having never actually touched the keys. It doesn't work that way. Instead, mental imagery complements your physical preparation. There's this classic sports psychology study where researchers divided basketball players into groups to test their free throw improvement. One group only practiced physically on the court. Another group only visualized shooting free throws. But the group that physically practiced and spent time vividly visualizing the ball going through the hoop, they saw the most dramatic improvements by far. The science is incredibly clear on this. Combining physical practice with mental imagery produces vastly superior results than just physical practice alone. The mind and the body simply learn best when they are working in unison.
And one of the most profound, truly life-changing benefits of this mind-body connection is the ability to master anxiety before important, high-stakes events. Think about why this matters to you specifically. The next time you have a daunting job interview, or maybe a difficult conversation you need to have with a loved one, or a major presentation at work, you can use your mind as a quiet rehearsal room. By repeatedly imagining yourself handling these difficult, high-pressure situations with total grace and success, you become deeply familiar with those scenarios. You are essentially desensitizing yourself to the panic. Because in a way, you've already been there 100 times in your mind. You have already navigated the emotional peaks and valleys in your visualization, so you'll often feel significantly calmer and far more grounded when those situations actually occur in reality. You literally strip the unknown of its power.
Perhaps the greatest takeaway of mental imagery is that every great performance, every single breakthrough, and every moment of real excellence is first created in the unseen landscape of the mind before it is ever expressed through physical action. Mental imagery reminds us that extraordinary performances rarely begin on the field or the stage or the boardroom. They begin quietly, vividly, and deliberately within the imagination. Every champion performs twice, first in the mind, then in reality.
So I want to leave you with this question. What future victory are you going to start rehearsing in your mind tonight? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you want to keep unlocking the secrets of human performance, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more Beautiful Mind content. Next time, we'll be diving into another completely fascinating tool to elevate your focus and unlock your full potential. Until then, keep visualizing your success, and I'll see you in the next one.